This is actually a very important talk that I want to share with you. So I work in tech and entrepreneurship. I have been running entrepreneurship programs for around 20 years. I grew up in Silicon Valley. I'm a big believer in the power of tech and entrepreneurship. But especially, I'm a big believer in the power of tech and entrepreneurship to do positive things in this world. I grew up in Silicon Valley, but I traveled quite a bit as a kid. I'm Lebanese American, spent time in the region. I studied political economy. I worked in education research. And I realized through all of that a lot of technology and innovation does not align with my values. And then actually a lot of technology and innovation is leading us in a very difficult and dark direction. So I've been running these programs for about 20 years. I'm a part of this organization called Bloom, and we run entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship education programs. And we've been working in the region, the Middle East and Africa, and trying to think, how can we scale the impact movement? How can we bring that power of values to connect with the power of entrepreneurship and technology? Now, I define entrepreneurship slightly differently than how a lot of other people do. How it's commonly taught is that entrepreneurship is how you make a lot of money really fast. And preferably, you make a lot of money really fast for a small number of people. The companies that are elevated the most are the companies that have the smallest number of employees, the smallest number of shareholders, and they make the maximum money for the fewest people, even if they cause harm in the process. Even innovations that are illegal are sometimes elevated as long as you have a good story, and then you can work to change the law, not for the public's benefit, but for your benefit, then you can be hailed as a success according to traditional entrepreneurship values of what we often see and what's often elevated. Entrepreneurship for me is the skills and the processes of doing, of building organizations, but it can be applied to many different kinds of organizations. It can be applied to, sure, tech, venture-backable companies, fantastic. Hopefully more of those with values. But it can also be applied to nonprofits, to social impact organizations, to cooperatives, to employee organizations, to civic organizations, to government, to the public sector. All of that is entrepreneurship. So just quickly here, I want to share a little bit about values, and then risks, and then a path forward, because I've always been concerned about the path that we're on. But as Shema also mentioned, is right now I do have a 13-month-old kid. How many people here have kids? Now keep your hands up if you have kids. How many of you people care about kids? Raise your hand. How many of you can raise your hands? Now, how many of you are concerned about the future of your kids and their kids, considering the current trajectory that we're on? Okay, about half. I am deeply concerned about the future of my kid and his kids and all of the kids out there and their kids, and I think it's incumbent upon us to think of how we can build a future where all of them can thrive. Now, like I said, I bridge these worlds between Silicon Valley and the Middle East. And we often elevate these technologies so much, but I think it's important for us to consider deeply what are the values that a lot of these people in these companies actually have behind them. We think that they're just building tools, but embedded in them are a lot of values here. Elon Musk, one of the drivers of innovation now in AI, thinks that with AI, we are summoning the demon. Has that stopped him from building AI or changed how he's been approaching it? Larry Page of Google thinks that it would be a natural step of the evolution process if humanity goes extinct and is replaced by AI. Not that he's fearful of that, but from what he's said and what he has written, it seems actually he might be excited about that. Humanity going extinct and replaced by AI. Mark Andreessen of A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz, one of the leading drivers of innovation in Silicon Valley, and one of the most active groups working on lobbying the government to have his values, to have their values represented in public policy, says that the enemy is ethics. The enemy is social responsibility. The enemy is sustainability. Jensen Huang of NVIDIA actively disavows that they have any responsibility towards social impact. Now, this also is not that they don't admit that there are risks. They do admit that there are risks. Dario Amodei, again, one of the leading, oh, sorry for the typo there, 25% chance, 1 out of 4 chance that AI will go very, very badly. Would you get in a car or an airplane that has a 25% chance of killing you? Or would you put your kid in that car that has a 25% chance of killing you? Sam Altman, OpenAI. If this goes wrong, it's lights out for everybody. Elon Musk, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. Okay, so these are some of the values and some of the admissions of people working and building these tools, not just that we're using, but that often we're elevating, that we're putting on a pedestal, that we're saying, let's build more organizations like that. Let's invest in more companies like that. Let's build our governments and help our governments in our cities follow that model of success. Is this the model that we want to be following? So the question is, what are our values? What's important to you? Do you care about humanity? Do you care about your kids and their kids actually thriving as humans? Growing up in communities that are healthy and regenerative and compassionate? I'm not Muslim, but I love these aspects of Islamic finance that say, money is not just a tool to build anything. Money has value, and it should be connected to values. Aspects of zakat, risk sharing, social benefit, ethics, avoiding incredible uncertainty. Avoiding incredible uncertainty as a core foundation of Islamic finance that should be a core foundation of all of our finance, all of our investments. Should be embedding these. So what are some aspects of our UAE values, of our national, of our GCC values? What do we think, in a broader sense, are important? Looking at 2030 agenda and other goals of building a healthy, thriving community. What are some of our global values? Again, not mine. What are some sets of values that we have said, okay, these are collective values that bring the world together? The Sustainable Development Goals, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Donut economics is maybe lesser known, but is also an amazing framework from a UK-based economist, Kate Raworth, about how we can build communities and economies that take care of our social foundations, our critical needs of humanity: education, housing, food, health, independence, rights, jobs, having basic income, etc. But doing all of that within our planetary limits. And we can do both. It just so happens in many contexts we're not doing both. We are not taking care of our social foundations within our planetary boundaries. So through all of this, through this work, this research that I've been working on and trying to build towards making this easier, more accessible for all of us to be thinking about this in our daily actions, is I came up with this framework, which I call the Collapse to Flourishing Index. Because we are all making choices here about what we are building, what we are investing in, how we are spending money, how we are spending time, about whether each of us, in all of our capacities, of whether we are contributing to the collapse or we are contributing to the flourishing. So with AI, there are 4 main areas of possible challenges. There's potential of AI takeover, super AI, et cetera, escaping, disempowering humans, causing harm, et cetera. There's potential for mass authoritarianism, people using AI to eliminate the rights, basic human dignities of people. AI can enable malicious actors through all sorts of mechanisms, and then even if there is no major catastrophe, if we are irresponsible in how we deploy this incredibly powerful tool, it can still lead to collapse by contributing to mass unemployment, social fragmentation, collapse of trust, collapse of a shared reality because of massive spread of misinformation, disinformation, deep fakes, etc. There are also these concerns around climate collapse. A collapse of basic rights, governance, our international system, basic elements of human dignity, inequality. Inequality can lead to systemic collapse. And how we are approaching AI and technology is also often contributing to increasing, sometimes massively increasing inequality. Some places you can see that with less stark reality than actually in Silicon Valley and in some of the cities there. Culture, attention, social cohesion, again, this collapse of a shared reality. We're seeing already from AI that we've been using for the last 20 years, collapse of mental health of our young people. People have been growing up with the technology that we've been experimenting on with these technologies are having a collapse of mental health. And then, of course, these issues. This last issue, initially this framework was just made up of 5, the first 5. This last one was separate because I said, what I'm focusing on here are elements where all of us can either be working to contribute towards collapse or contribute to flourishing. And this last one, chemical, biological, radioactive, nuclear, I was thinking this is mostly in highly restrictive labs, behind national security protections. We don't need to worry about that. That's getting taken care of. And yet we are now building technology that makes this more accessible to everybody. Imagine what the world would be like if we didn't have the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Agreement that restrained how many people have access to nuclear weapons. We just said, everyone, have a nuclear weapon. But please, just use it for good stuff. You can have it, just please use it for good stuff. That would not be a pretty world. Okay, with these risks, I'm actually an optimist. I am an eternal optimist because I think we can do stuff about all of these. I'm an incredible believer in our potential as humanity to come together and solve incredibly deep challenges. We have done it before, we can do it again, but it requires all of us. Now again, these are not my values that I'm trying to impose. I'm tapping into what we have already agreed on, that we've already aligned on, our global values, that we just need to go back and say, yes, let's actually make those a reality. And let's embed those in our innovation ecosystems and in our startup accelerators and in our university entrepreneurship programs. I think that entrepreneurship is so beautiful. It shouldn't just be in an entrepreneurship program or at the business school of the university. It should be in every department of every university. But focused on how we can bring more of this positive values-oriented innovation and entrepreneurship alive. Now again, here's a quick call to action because there are rules here for all of us. First off, as consumers, we are all buying things every day. And if we are buying things that don't align with our values, then we are supporting those companies and those people who are not aligned with our values. Every day we make decisions about what clothes we buy, what food we eat, where we go shopping, what websites we use, etc. And we should be embedding values in every one of those decisions. Vote with your wallet every time you use your wallet. I know that's not all easy, and all of those solutions don't exist, which is why we have number 2 here. We need more values-aligned entrepreneurs. If we don't have those options to buy according to our values, then let's start those companies that align with our values. Anytime that we see something here, there's this aspect in economics called import replacement economic development. If you have too much imports, you can deplete an economy, right? If you have too much imports versus exports, you deplete your economy. We need values replacement entrepreneurship so that we are taking those companies that represent our values, starting those companies that represent our values and building them and shifting more of the economic weight that we're all putting in to the companies that support our values. We need investors and funders to shift this, not just the private investors, but how can we encourage a huge amount of the funding from this region, from the world, is supporting entrepreneurship and innovation, and very often that funding does not align with the values of those governments, with the values of those countries, but it's following what we have put on that pedestal of what is the innovation and technology that we should aspire to. So how can we encourage all private and public investors, if any of you are investors, to align your investments, your thesis, your portfolio with your values, not for me, but do it for your kids, for your kids' kids, for the people you see around you who you care about having a future to live and grow up in. And then, of course, policymakers. Around the world, we have people who are making policy about which companies to support, which companies not to support, how are those values getting represented in those policies, and how are those governments supporting organizations, and yes, enacting more governance to protect people, to support people according to these values. There was recently this ban in Australia for kids to use social media. How can there be more governments who are looking out for their kids, for their citizens, and making these tough stances against the companies that have clearly communicated that they do not care about you or your kids or your country or your future? Now, we're working to make this framework, the Collapse to Flourishing Index, something that is adaptable, that is usable, that is actionable by you, by consumers, by governments, by innovators, by investors. And this is something here that is in progress. We're working on. I'll share the basic. There's even a link here. But that this is something that people can take these decisions every day. They're building. They're working on making decisions about which startups to support. And then to see how incrementally we can work to build these ecosystems and these organizations and these economies that help us all thrive now and into the future. If you folks have any questions on that, please let me know. Thank you.